Right here, I have the DJI Air 3 and the DJI Air 3S. In today's video, we're going to compare them. This is an entirely unsponsored video. I got both of these drones on my own. I paid for both of these drones. And in today's video, we're going to see what's the difference, and if it's really worth you upgrading to the Air 3S or choosing to buy that over the Air 3. Now, the Air 3S supposedly comes with some improvements. One is, of course, that main sensor size. The sensor on the front here is now a 1-inch CMOS sensor over the 1/1/3 sensor that is on the 3X camera and also the primary camera on the DJI Mini 4 Pro and the Air 3. So this sensor is supposed to be larger, it's supposed to have less noise. Also, in addition, you have this lidar module up here, which allows the drone to do a bunch of different things at night. It allows it to detect distances, change focusing ranges. It's an interesting piece of hardware that I actually do expect to start being adopted in maybe multiple angles. I wouldn't even be surprised to start seeing this maybe on like the next iteration of drones, to have this on perhaps 3 or 4, maybe even 5-way obstacle, 6-way lidar-based obstacle avoidance on top of these standard sensors. I think that the obstacle avoidance is just going to keep getting better and better, and I feel like this especially has some major improvements over the optical-based obstacle avoidance. So I have a couple things I want to talk about. I want to talk about the main differences. How good are those differences? Is those differences justify buying this drone over the old one? And also my personal experience using this drone over the last couple days. So the obstacle avoidance with this lidar based module is actually extremely good. It's extremely good because not only does this sensor have the ability to detect in complete darkness, which means that you have functional obstacle avoidance when you're flying at night. It also has a bunch of other things that it brings. Specifically, I've always found it very difficult to have the drone autonomously fly under the trees, especially in winter, because the branches were very thin, and the optical-based obstacle avoidance usually did not detect the thin branches as well. Now, I'm not saying that this is perfect, that it can't detect like strings and stuff, but for my testing, things that normally would have gotten the Air 3, especially when it was tracking you from behind where this was actually being used, this was able to detect that and not fly into it. So specifically when it's following you, that is when this obstacle avoidance can be taken advantage of. I don't think that the obstacle avoidance is going to go away. That has some benefits, but at the same time, this is just so much superior, at least in my testing, when it was able to fly around and track me. Also, this drone, interestingly, has a software quirk that they've upgraded. They've made these sensors, I want to say, more sensitive to light. I think maybe just to add a software fix, but now this drone can fly at dusk, which they supposedly say is about 1 lux, which is the equivalent of me holding a candle and then a meter away putting like a board or a wall or something, and how well lit up that wall is what they're expecting this to be capable of flying in. Now, in my testing, I probably tested it a little too late after dusk when it was pretty dark. And also I live in a rather dark area, and also then I tested it maybe a little too early around dusk. And both of those times, the obstacle avoidance didn't work when it was too dark, which makes sense. I live in a dark area. It's not in the middle of a city. And then also in the inverse of that, it did work fine at dusk. I do believe, though, that you do get a little bit more time in which you can get obstacle avoidance out of these sensors, rather than like say for a Mavic 3 or something, where as soon as it starts getting kind of dark, it's just like, oh yeah, no obstacle avoidance here. This does work, and even when it is in the dark, you can still see, especially when you're looking at like at the camera view, the ability to, like when you fly different directions, it will show you the camera sensors here, like what they're seeing. You can see that it can still make out features. So I do think that the obstacle avoidance at least is somewhat of an improvement. However, it still does not let you fly in perfect darkness. The only thing that's going to provide you any bit of obstacle avoidance in perfect darkness is this front sensor here, which is good. Just keep that in mind, that if you're flying in the dark, you want to make sure you use the sensor. You want to fly straight all the time, and that will probably give you the best benefit. Now, the lidar sensor, in my opinion, is superior than the optical, as I said. So it is a little bit more trustworthy. So a couple other improvements is, just like with the Air 3, you have the ability to autonomously mission plan. So if you're one of those people that uses this for like commercial 3D modeling and 3D mapping, you have the same mission planning capabilities as you would with the Air 3 using WaypointMap. The quality of the photogrammetry models, I'll make another video comparing the actual sensor quality and the final result quality of these two drones. I do expect, especially since less noise with a larger sensor, I do expect that this drone specifically with the larger sensor will have slightly better quality outputs. However, I do think that honestly, especially in high light conditions, the difference between these two drones when they take pictures is very minimal. The only time that you're really going to start seeing the sensor benefit, specifically in 3D modeling at least, is when you're going to get into darker areas or areas that may be not fully lit, shaded, etc. So DJI also has put out another feature called Focus Track. And effectively what this does is it allows you to have the drone focus similar to some of their cinema systems. I have a DJI RS3 Pro with the lidar module on there, and that allows my camera to effectively focus based off of how close I am to the camera. And interestingly, they've adopted the same strategy for this drone, which can't say I really complain, because it does provide some really nice focusing capability when you're walking around and you're having it track you. However, this drone is still rather loud, so having it follow you around doesn't really offer that much of a benefit. It's good maybe if you're trying to capture a scene, but you don't have any audio. So if you want to capture, maybe people walking, or you want to capture something up close, maybe you doing something, then yes, this would be good. It's just, it's an interesting quirk. I do like it. I do think it's a beneficial, and I'm glad they took advantage of the lidar sensor in that way. But the functionality of it is or the practicality of using it is a little difficult when you can't capture any audio, especially because when you really start noticing how beneficial it is when you're probably about as close as I am to my camera right now, which effectively means that it's really difficult to get close enough that it is going to be show some benefit with the bokeh in the background, but also not completely ruin the audio because you're standing 3 feet from the drone. I will say that it makes the video more sharp. Maybe in the past the video has just not been focused well enough, but it does provide much more sharper video because I think it's always in focus. And it also can provide some really good video quality if you're just using this as a standard camera and you're not using this as maybe a drone. So as for the sensor size, I would say that the sensor size is an improvement, specifically in those low light situations. I think that even in some of the lighter situations where you have some shadows, you're getting more light out of the sensor. However, I don't think the improvement is all that everyone was hoping it would be. Everyone was really hyping up a 1-inch sensor, and there is still noise. It's still not great. And even with the Mavic 3 and its 4/3 sensor, that still has noise. So I think it just becomes a spectrum of how much noise you can tolerate. I think the Mini 4 and the Air 3 has good enough noise for most people. And I think the only time you'd really want to get a better sensor is if you were trying to get some really low light situations. And even then, I think the Mini 4 Pro does a really solid job. So I don't actually see the argument for the sensor that much. I think it's maybe something to consider. But the sensor size improvement, for what I have at least seen in my testing and how much it actually affects the pictures, is not that big of a deal. However, especially if maybe you're flying at low light, especially if you're flying at night, I was able to see that I was able to capture a little bit more light in that situation. So if you're a nighttime photographer and that's important to you, sure, but then why not just go and upgrade to an old Mavic 3 with the 2-camera version and get that 4/3 sensor, or Mavic 3 Classic, and then get that bigger sensor if that's really important to you. Because honestly, the top sensor is the same one that's in the Air 3. So the 2-camera system, it's really just using the same camera as it was in the Air 3. The only difference is that bottom sensor. So to be honest with you, that honestly on its own isn't that big of an improvement. Now, however, they have added a bigger sensor, they have added lidar, they've added better capabilities for the obstacle avoidance. So the battery life, really, in my opinion, they say that it was about a minute less, so 45, so instead of 46, 45 minutes of battery life with like their specialized conditions. I saw that it was a little bit more when I was flying below the trees. I wonder if it's because the lidar module is having to work harder. I want to say it was maybe like 3 or 4 minutes less than like what I saw on the Air 3, at least when flying it. I don't know how weird that is, but that's at least like from my experience. Another thing I want to mention as well is in which the speed in which this drone will fly. And I know this may like seem weird, but when you're usually flying like the Air 3, you have the standard mode, which is with obstacle avoidance. You have a cine mode, which is like with the slowed down, like minimized controls. And then you have the sport mode, which turns everything off and the drone flies really quickly. I found that the Air 3S definitely flew a lot faster. I don't know if it's because it's relying more on the lidar module and that's a lot quicker, obviously, but I just noticed that it really flew a lot quicker. Whether or not I was trying to like fly over some trees, or I was kind of trying to follow something, it was really interesting just how quickly this drone would move compared to anything else that I've flown before. I know you're not going to be flying that quickly going backwards, but specifically where it mattered when you were trying to track something and move forward, this drone did move very quickly. And I was just, it is such a stark difference that if I were to recommend this drone for anyone, it would be strictly because of the fact that how quickly this can move forward with obstacle avoidance on. Now, I don't think if you're moving that forward, maybe you're trying to track something and it's kind of important you're not paying that much attention. But for the most part, this drone was interesting in how it did that. Now, there was one caveat that I noticed with that, though, is that the LiDAR module has kind of like a certain range. And if you get in the range, like get an obstacle right in the range between where the camera or the optical sensors are doing the detection of the obstacles and where the lidar switches over, somewhere in that range it does get a little funky. Like if you have an obstacle and you fly like right in that area, it gets a lot closer than it should before it like really close before it realizes that's an obstacle and stops. So I don't know if it's just exclusively using the lidar for the front, if it's using a combination of them or something like that. But it was a little weird, and the certain areas would not work too well with the obstacle avoidance. And I think it's maybe just a software feature that will hopefully get fixed soon. But overall, I think the main pros for choosing this drone is, of course, if you want that speed in which you're flying the drone, you want the obstacle avoidance, that safety of the obstacle avoidance when you're flying the drone. And also, if you really want those niche low light settings, I don't think the focusing is really that justified of a feature for most people. It's cool, it's an added bonus, and I think it does make the video look better, but getting it to practically work in a situation which you could use it realistically is difficult. I think the lidar on the front is a beneficial bonus. I think I like it having it in the dark, and I do think that this drone is specifically designed for people that are flying in the dark more. And I think even more so than maybe a Mavic 3 or a Mavic 3 Pro, just because of these added features. Especially with this low light obstacle avoidance, that's a benefit. And then with the lidar sensor, I think this drone is supposed to be for people that want to fly at night, more so than like a Mini 4 Pro, even more so than a Mavic. It's just specifically catered to that with the sensor and this design. So would I recommend this drone based off of those things? Yes. I think, as I said, night photographer, maybe like a daytime photographer, with something with a little bit more capability than a Mini 4. And then the Mavic system, I would get it if you were really focused on the quality, but if you wanted to do this and you cared about maybe your drone not crashing or obstacles, then I would get the Air 3S. I think it's better flying quality for the Air 3S, but better image quality for the Mavic 3. Thanks very much for watching. Check out my video in which I compare the 3D model quality and the photogrammetry quality, as well as doing some mission planning, and that will be coming up shortly. I also have some reviews coming up of some different other drones that we'll be checking out shortly as well. So thank you very much for watching. Have a great day.